Welcome to Peacevision. We are a portal for positive change. And with me today is one of our environmental filmmakers. You know him, Erik. Amazing guy. And today, Erik, we're going to be talking about water, right?
Yes, one of the most important issues that affects everybody in the world.
And what are the main things that are, like here, we're in Southwest Florida where we're broadcasting from, and, we're dealing with things like cyanobacteria, blue-green algae, red tide. And I got to tell you, it's made a major impact on our everyday life here. And, the quality of the health of people. What are you finding? Is this a problem that's everywhere now, and what's being done to combat it?
When I was doing my travels, I found worldwide that the water as we know it is under attack everywhere. Between mining, whether it's gold mining in the Amazon or phosphate mining in Florida, or multiple different types of corporate pollution that's being dumped into the waterways, the waters that we saw in Cambodia, Vietnam, Philippines, everywhere, people are fighting for clean water. There's actually an estimated 13 million people a year that die from not having access to clean water or comes from the water that they're polluted. So we found that everywhere in the world, people are fighting for clean water. And when I got back to the States, I found that in Florida, you have so many different water issues going on. And with, everybody started paying attention because of the red tide, but there are so many more issues at work there. And when I went down to work on my documentary, I found that a lot of the waterways have excessive amounts of pollution in them. We actually tested the waters and found that what's being dumped in and what's being allowed to be dumped in to the waterways is affecting all the local rivers, and then all the municipalities will pull their water from there. And although they try to clean it with use of chlorine and some other chemicals, they don't always pull out the radiation and the toxic heavy metals and some of the other really dangerous things that are allowed, again, and permitted to be dumped into the water. So I found in Florida, not only do you have a mix of a lot of corporate pollution that is actually feeding this natural phenomenon like red tide and the natural phenomenons of the blue-green algae. And you've also got a government that's sort of looking the other way. But what's amazing about Florida is you have the most incredible amount of activists. So people just standing up saying, we want our clean water back. We demand clean water for our children and our grandchildren. And I found Florida to be a hope spot. In conservation, it's always, everything seems a little overwhelming, but somewhere like Florida is a hope spot where the people are fighting back. One of the most amazing aspects that I found in Florida is the rights of nature movement. And if you're not familiar with the rights of nature movement, it's an international movement. They actually gained a lot of legal ground in Ecuador back in 2011. And what the idea is to give nature its own rights as an entity and allow any citizen to be able to sue a corporation on behalf of a piece of nature in order to sustain it. So it's a big challenge, legal challenge to the system, and it's one that we're finding the biggest problem is that a lot of this pollution is allowed within the system as it is now. And instead of just trying to change all the system and the way everything works and all the permitting, one of the most inventive ways is to just take a legal challenge to these companies claiming that the waterways that we all share are their resource for their business. So the rights of nature has been incredible. And what I love about it is they also include a lot of indigenous perspective into a Western legal framework. So we're taking this concept of a shared nature and we're trying to create a Western framework, a legal framework. Like in America, we're combating the Citizens United, which allows companies to be treated as people and have the same rights as people. So we now need to give the environment the same rights as people, or it's going to be disappearing at even a faster rate than it is right now.
Yeah, I think some of the misconceptions that people might have is something like the Environmental Protection Agency. Sounds great, right? They're here to protect the environment. What role do they really play?
The EPA, unfortunately, they have a very amazing history, and I think they're one of the most important instruments that we have, but they have suffered what I call cancer of the body politic, which is the erosion of these people that are supposed to be protecting us have actually turned into protecting the corporations that are harming us. The EPA was started by Nixon back in the day because we had people that would just park their cars on riverbanks, throw tires into local waterways. We had a lot of disregard for the environment because weren't educated enough on it in general. Now we have a totally different world. But what happened, unfortunately, is the EPA, for example, in Florida, they played a major role. In 2016, they charged Mosaic Mining the largest fine ever levied on a private company for poisoning the people. And that was actually an amazing, amazing breakthrough, and it held the company liable, both in Florida and in Louisiana. So what we find now is that the EPA in 2016 changed leadership, and a coal lobbyist named Andrew Wheeler was placed in charge of it. And so since 2016, the EPA has been trimming their effect, breaking down their budgets, and eventually Andrew Wheeler was able to pull back, for example, the Clean Water Act, and a lot of other protections that were really vital that we had in place. And they were able to pull them back and allow companies to engage in what's called best management practices, which best management practices is a very controversial approach that allows a company to self-regulate, self-test, and then report their own tests.
Once again, it sounds good in the title, right? In actuality, it's not what it pretends to be. So it sounds like the new EPA, the new Environmental Protection Agency, has to be all of us, right? And our voices.
You know what? That's beautifully said, John, because the EPA, as we know it, has actually closed. They have repealed every piece of enforcement and every piece of emissions legislation that they have right now. So it's actually a free-for-all right now for every company. So all we have is our voice and what we can do, but we can fight this back. It's not a loss at all. You know, it's a battle, but we're all engaged in it. And we have great ways to fight back. And one of the most important, like I said, you can check out rightsofnature.org, find your local chapter, and see how you can get involved in fighting legislation. And, you know, it's working so well that actually in Florida in January, one of the legislators there actually proposed a bill to try to stop the Rights of Nature from proposing their bill. So you can tell it's been effective because it's got them running scared, and you know they're now trying to prevent the legal rights that they're trying to push out. So what we have is us, you know, and that's all we have. So we need to come together, and it's a beautiful time. It's a time like no other because we have the internet to connect us, and we have a worldwide understanding now. You know, we see things very different in the modern times. So we have this beautiful way that we can all get together, and we have to always remember that we are all brothers and sisters, and we have a voice together. And together, we are one voice that's stronger than all the white noise that generally fades us out as we try to speak about.
You know, and at Peacevision, what we always try to do is, you know, not just point out the problems, but point out the solutions, because, you know, that you could be pointing out problems until you're gone, right? But we want to find things that we can all do together to really make an impact. I know here locally, they're trying to get petitions right now. There's a local body of water called the Caloosahatchee River, and Rights of Nature is actively trying to collect over 40,000 signatures so that that body of water can be protected. And once again, think of it not so much as protecting nature or giving nature rights, but thinking of it instead as giving us the rights to have a clean environment, us the right and our children to be able to drink clean water. I think that's really what it's about.
That exactly, and that's beautifully said, because our access to nature around us has eroded over the last 50 years, which is crazy because it's technically all shared commodity of everybody. And so we have to stop thinking that it's just a resource for them. One great example is in Florida with the mining industry or the sugar industry. You can pick either one, really. They are allowed and permitted by local entities to pollute the waters, which again, then once it leaves their area, it's now everyone's problem, but they don't see it that way. So we do, and you're absolutely right. We need to preserve our rights to have access to this because they are disappearing, and we don't want to end up in a world where we have to depend on things like bottled water and other aspects that are other environmental killers.
In terms of the sugar industry here in the state of Florida, I know that they've been the bad guy all along, but at the same time, I hear them coming out and saying, hey, we want to be part of the solution. We want to play ball here too. And I think that in the environment that we've had up until this point, it's so polarized that nobody will come together and make a deal. We're in a time where we need to make deals, right? We need to hold our hand out and say, we understand your business and livelihood how can we meet in the middle here and protect all of us and your families as well? So anyway,
exactly. Conservationists tend to be thought of as these crazy revolutionaries, but in reality, we're just asking businesses to work with us. You know, I think that a lot of people have sort of an ideal that they say, well, let's shut it down, but that's not a reality. And the reality is it's way more complicated than that, but we do need their cooperation. And I think you're absolutely right. We're in a time where everything's so polarized that the conversation again is being lost. And that's the whole idea, is to bring this back. And, you know, we can all talk about solutions together. And, you know, sugar is a great example of that, you know, and I do think that it's time that we try to find ways to move forward, you know, and the only way we're going to do that is if we all come together. We are the virus, but at the same time, we are also the cure, you know, so our activities have destroyed the environment, but our activities can also save it.
Amen. Hey, thank you so much for all the great, amazing work that you're doing out in the world. You're an inspiration to me and a lot of other people in the world. So keep on keeping on.
Thanks, John. Yeah, there's definitely no shortage of things to work on out there. So it's good that we're all together doing this.
Erik Crown, we will see you soon. Thanks so much.
Right. Thanks, John. See you soon.